Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something, well, pretty important actually. It's session hijacking. It's a cybersecurity threat that's, well, honestly, it's way more common than you might think.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that session hijacking, uh, it's so effective because of this thing called TCP/IP. It's how most computers communicate,
Yeah.
online. And the thing is, TCP/IP doesn't have any protection against this type of attack.
Oh, wow. Okay. So before we get too far into this, I want to make sure we all understand when we say session, like in web browsing, what exactly are we talking about?
Well, think about it this way. Every time you log into a website, you're basically, your computer and that website are starting a conversation. And to keep track of everything you're doing, the website gives your computer this unique session token. It's kind of like a digital valet ticket, It says, yep, this person's allowed to be here. They can do stuff.
So someone steals that valet ticket and they can just pretend to be you.
Exactly. The source material actually defines session hijacking as an attack where someone steals or guesses or intercepts this token and basically impersonates the legitimate user. And that's where the trouble really starts.
And the source lists, like 6 reasons why this attack is so successful. I mean, some of them are honestly pretty unsettling.
Oh, yeah.
Like one of the reasons was a lack of account lockout mechanisms, right?
Yeah.
So a hacker could just keep guessing different valet tickets until they find one that works.
Unfortunately, yeah.
That's
It really is like trying a bunch of keys in a lock, right?
right.
Eventually, one is going to fit.
And then there's this whole indefinite session timeout thing. So if I'm on my computer and I walk away, my session could stay open for hours if I don't log out.
Exactly. Like, let's say you're at a coffee shop and you check your online banking, but you forget to log out. If you leave your laptop for even a minute, someone could slip in because that session's still active.
That's a scary thought. The source also mentioned there are weaknesses in how some websites create and manage session IDs, which makes them even easier to guess. It's like some websites are using
Yeah.
paper valet tickets that anyone could forge.
Exactly.
And what's even more worrying is
And here's where it gets even more concerning is some hijacking methods, they can still work even when a website has things like encryption in place.
so even if you think you're taking precautions, you're still vulnerable.
Right. It's like having a super high-tech lock on your car door. But the valet is just giving out keys to everyone.
So we know what session hijacking is. We know why it's such a threat. But how does this actually happen? Like, how do these attacks work? The source broke it down into two types, passive and active.
Right. So passive hijacking, think of it like eavesdropping on a conversation. The attacker is just silently listening to your computer and the website and trying to snag that session token without you knowing.
So they're like a spy listening in on a phone call.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. And active hijacking, that's when
Yeah.
they're actually trying to take control, right?
Right. Active hijacking, they're not just listening, they're actively trying to, like take control. They might inject malicious code
Yeah.
or even use other tricks to force your computer to just give up the token. It's like, imagine someone cutting into a phone line and taking over the conversation.
Okay, so to understand this a little better, we need to talk about computer networking. The source mentioned this thing called the OSI model, which sounds pretty technical.
It is technical, but just think about it this way. The OSI model is kind of like the postal system for computer networks.
Yeah.
It's got different layers, and each layer has a specific job, like sorting the mail and making sure it gets to the right person.
Are there any specific places in this system where these attacks usually happen?
Yeah, there are two main areas, the application level and the network level. Application level hijacking is, it happens when the website itself has vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Like imagine if the post office didn't have secure mailboxes. Anyone could walk in and just take your mail.
And network level.
Network level hijacking. That's like someone intercepting your mail in transit. They're not targeting the post office. They're grabbing the package before it gets delivered.
Okay. Well, this is all pretty unsettling.
Yeah.
Is there anything we can do to protect ourselves?
Well, the good news is there is.
Yeah.
One of the simplest things you can do is just log out of websites when you're done using them.
Yeah.
Especially sensitive ones like online banking. And don't just close the window. Actually log out.
And public Wi-Fi, those are hot spots for trouble, right?
Oh, absolutely. Public Wi-Fi is like sending your mail on a postcard.
Okay.
Anyone can read it if you have to use public Wi-Fi. Think about using a VPN. It's like putting your mail in a sealed envelope.
And of course, strong passwords are crucial, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's like having a different lock for every door in your house.
Exactly. And also make sure that you're keeping your browser and operating system up to date.
Right, like security upgrades.
Yeah, exactly. It's like security upgrades for your digital home.
So those are some basics. The source material goes into more detail about specific countermeasures, but these are things that everyone should know, right?
Absolutely. These are the basics.
Well, this has been a really great overview, but we've only just scratched the surface. Welcome back to our deep dive on session hijacking. Last time, we talked about, what session hijacking is and why it's a threat and all the different levels of a computer network where it can happen. But now I think we should get into some of the specifics, like the nitty-gritty. Remember those terms from the source material? Things like session ID prediction and
Yeah.
session desynchronization. I think it's time to unpack those.
Okay, yeah, let's start with session ID prediction. So this is basically like a guessing game where hackers try to exploit weaknesses and how websites create those digital valet tickets, the session IDs. So if the system creates predictable IDs, like using sequential numbers or patterns that are easy to figure out, then attackers can just guess valid IDs and hijack sessions.
So, if my session ID is 1234, a hacker could guess the next one is 1235. That seems, I don't know, a little too easy, right?
Well, you'd be surprised how many websites still use weak generation methods.
No.
So it can be really effective. It's like a valet stand using simple numbers for their tickets instead of a more complex system. Makes it easy for someone to sneak in.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. What about session desynchronization? That sounds a lot
Sure.
more complex.
It is a bit more involved. Imagine you're writing a letter back and forth with someone, right? But there's this mischievous little gremlin who keeps changing the words in your letter before it gets to your friend.
Oh, okay.
That's kind of what happens in session desynchronization. The attacker basically manipulates the communication between your computer and the website so that it creates a mismatch in how each side is tracking the session.
So they're like, meh, creating typos in our letter.
Yes. For example, let's say you're logged into your email, right? An attacker might send a message, a specially crafted message, that makes your browser think. You've clicked a link and moved to a different page in your email, but the server hasn't registered that change yet.
So your computer thinks it's on one page of the letter, and the website thinks it's on a different page.
Exactly. And this creates this window of vulnerability where the attacker can slip in and take over your session using whatever information they've gathered during all this confusion.
This is sounding like you need serious tech skills to pull this off. Do hackers need to be expert level to do this?
Well, it depends really on how complex the attack is. Some basic hijacking methods, like exploiting weak session IDs, that can be done with just tools and scripts you can find online. It's like having a master key that can open simple locks,
So even someone with limited hacking skills could do it.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah.
But more sophisticated things, like session desynchronization, that requires, a deeper understanding of network protocols.
Yeah.
Web application vulnerabilities, that's more like being able to pick a really complicated lock.
Okay. Let's shift gears for a second. Back to those two main types of hijacking. Passive and active. We talked about them like eavesdropping versus taking over a conversation. Are there any signs that someone might be trying to hijack my session?
So with passive hijacking, it's all about being stealthy, The attacker is just silently observing, just intercepting your communication without really interfering. They might be lurking on public Wi-Fi or using some kind of malicious software to monitor your internet traffic. It's like someone reading your postcards, but not changing anything.
So it's almost impossible to detect?
Yeah, it can be really tricky. Sometimes you might see unusual activity on your accounts, like unexpected logins or changes to your profile. But a lot of times, there are no visible signs until it's too late.
Okay, and active hijacking, that's more like someone cutting into a phone call, right?
Right, active hijacking. It's more like a hostile takeover. The attacker actually injects themselves into your session, and they disrupt the communication and manipulate data in real time. They might use techniques, man-in-the-middle attacks, where they position themselves between you and the website and intercept and modify data as it passes through.
So they're not just reading the mail, they're changing it.
Precisely. And because they're manipulating data, you're more likely to actually see something suspicious happening. Like you might get sudden website redirects, slow loading times, or error messages that just don't make sense.
So if a website starts acting glitchy, or I see weird redirects, that could be a sign of active hijacking.
Yeah, it's definitely something to watch out for. Always pay attention to those red flags.
Okay. back to the OSI model again. You mentioned that session hijacking can happen at different layers, like different points in our postal system analogy. So how does that
Yeah.
affect the type of attack and the methods that are used?
Well, remember, those different layers, they all have different jobs, right? So different hijacking techniques target those different jobs. Application-level hijacking focuses on exploiting vulnerabilities in the software that's running on the website.
So if a website is poorly coded, it's like a post office with unlocked doors.
Exactly. Like if a website
Yeah.
doesn't properly sanitize user input, an attacker could inject malicious code into like a form submission and then hijack the session when that code is executed.
Okay, and what about network level hijacking?
Network-level hijacking. That usually focuses on the parts of the system that are transmitting data packets between devices. Think of it like intercepting mail trucks on a delivery route.
So it's like hijacking a mail truck and tampering with the packages before they reach their destination.
Exactly. These attacks can be a lot harder to pull off. They require, more technical expertise, but they can also be more devastating
Huh.
because they can bypass security measures that are implemented at higher levels.
Wow, this is a lot. It seems like session hijacking is this constant cat and mouse game between attackers and defenders.
Well, absolutely. As security measures get better, attackers just find new ways in. That's why it's so important to stay informed about, the latest threats and best practices.
So speaking of best practices, we talked about some general tips last time, like strong passwords, being careful on public Wi-Fi. Are there any specific strategies to prevent session hijacking?
Yeah, definitely. And one of the best things you can do is implement robust session management practices. This includes
Yeah.
like using strong random session ID generation algorithms, setting appropriate session timeouts, and storing and transmitting those session tokens securely.
So websites need to do their part
Yeah.
to make those digital valet tickets more secure.
Absolutely. Strong server-side security is crucial. But users can also take steps to, minimize their own risk.
Like what?
Well, using HTTPS is a big one. Whenever you can, that little lock icon in your browser, that means your connection to the website is encrypted. So it's much harder for attackers to intercept your data. It's like sending your mail in a secure, tamper-proof envelope.
And we talked about public Wi-Fi before.
Right. If you have to use public Wi-Fi, use a VPN. It creates this secure tunnel for your data, like an extra layer of protection.
And what about those software updates?
Yeah, those are essential too.
Yeah.
You need to keep your operating system, your browser, all your software really up to date because that patches known security vulnerabilities.
This has been a really deep dive into the technical side of session hijacking. But like we said at the beginning, there's a human element to all of this too.
Right. We've really focused on the how of session hijacking, but I think in part 3 we should explore the why and the who. Why do attackers target sessions and who are the most vulnerable?
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've spent the last 2 parts really digging into the technical side of session hijacking. But we kind of hinted that there's more to this story, right? There's this whole human element that we need to explore.
Yeah, for sure. We've been talking a lot about the how of these attacks, but now I think we need to talk about the why, right? Why do they happen and who's really at risk? Because, behind all the technical stuff, session hijacking is really about people taking advantage of other people.
Okay, so let's start with the why. What are hackers really trying to get out of this? Is it just about stealing credit card numbers?
Yeah, that's definitely a big part of it. I mean, if they hijack your session, they can get all sorts of sensitive information, right? Your banking logins, personal data, even your social media accounts.
So they could steal your identity, mess up your online reputation. It's not just about the money.
No, not at all. Imagine someone takes over your Facebook or Twitter, right, and starts posting things under your name. That could do some serious damage, both personally and professionally.
That's pretty scary, honestly. So, okay, the impact can be huge. But who are these attackers actually going after? Is it everyone, or are some people more vulnerable than others?
I mean, anyone online is a potential target, right? But some people are definitely more at risk, like people who use public Wi-Fi a lot.
Yeah.
Or have weak passwords, or don't keep their software updated. They're making it way easier for someone to get in.
So being careful online, it's just as important as being careful in the real world.
Exactly.
You wouldn't leave your front door unlocked, right?
Right. But there's another layer to this too that's even more complex. It's the psychology behind these attacks.
Yeah.
Hackers, they exploit how people think too to make their attacks more successful.
You're talking about social engineering, right?
Exactly. Social engineering is a huge part of it.
So it's
Right.
tricking people into giving up their information.
Yeah. Like they might pretend to be someone you know,
Hmm.
or offer you something that sounds too good to be true, like a free gift card or something. They want to gain your trust, basically, and then use that against you.
It's like those phishing emails, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they usually try to make you feel like you need to act NLW, like your account's been compromised, so you don't really stop and think.
So how do we protect ourselves from that? It seems like they're getting really good at this stuff.
Honestly, the best thing you can do is just be aware. Be skeptical.
Mm.
Don't click on links without thinking. Don't open attachments from people you don't know. Always verify who's sending you something. And if something seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
being careful about opening a package from a stranger.
exactly.
And I guess if you do fall victim to session hijacking, what should you do?
Well, the first thing is you have to act fast. Change all your passwords immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Contact your bank, your credit card company, and report the incident to, you know, whoever you need to.
Wow. This has been a really incredible deep dive, honestly. We've gone from the technical side to the human side. And I think the most important thing is we all need to be more aware of this threat and take steps to protect ourselves.
I agree, 100%. We can't just rely on websites to keep us safe.
Yeah.
We have to be informed and be vigilant.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive on session hijacking. It's been a fascinating journey, and I hope everyone listening has learned something valuable. Remember, knowledge is power, and staying informed is the absolute best way to stay safe online.
Thanks for joining us. And remember, stay curious, stay safe, and keep exploring.